Hi everybody. Alex here and I'm beginning a let's play of my favorite Final Fantasy game. Final Fantasy III. I know everybody else calls it Final Fantasy VI, but it says 3 on my box, 3 on my cartridge, and 3 on the screen, so I'm calling it 3. You can send your complaints to idon'tgiveafuck@gmail.com. Now, Final Fantasy III was actually my introduction into the Final Fantasy franchise, as well as being the first major game I played and owned on the Super Nintendo my parents bought for me. So needless to say, I had quite the adventure as a kid. Going from fighting with magic to thieves, kings, ninjas, and the world ending. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll mainly be looking at the beginning pieces of the game. As some of you might know, we have a lot of translation errors in this game. Kefka's lines in particular were mostly a translation error, but it gave him so much of his personality that Western fans love still to this day. We have Wedge and Vix here when it should be Wedge and Big's intentional Star Wars references that would carry on into other Final Fantasy games. This opening segment is nothing. A breeze really. Just fire some magic beams here and there and plow through enemies within second. We currently have no idea who this sorcerer, as they call her, is, but we'll get to name her at a later date. I see this game mentioned in a lot of people's top 10 lists when it comes to RPGs, Final Fantasy games, or just games in general. Especially Super Nintendo titles. Super Nintendo just had a great and expansive library. How can you go wrong with such titles like Super Mario World, Zelda: A Link to the Past, Super Metroid, Super Castlevania 4, the Super Star Wars Trilogy, Mortal Kombat, Battletoads and Double Dragon, and countless others. It was also the place to play RPGs like Final Fantasy II and III, as well as Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, and Super Mario RPG. I have a lot of these games still available on my old Super Nintendo, and I plan to play a couple of those titles after I finish with this game. As I said earlier, this game was my introduction to gaming. And you can imagine that was quite the introduction. I didn't do a lot with naming characters back then, but I did name Terra Alexis the first time I played through it to immerse myself as the main character. Little did I know at the time that it was more of an ensemble cast than just straight up one leading character. And what an ensemble it has. As you embark on this journey with me, whether you played the game before, seen it play, or never seen this game in action, you'll see many different unique and inspirational characters touch the screen. I can't wait to show you the world of Final Fantasy III. Watch at least one comment go, "It's Final Fantasy VI, damn it." The first boss in this game is really easy. As most first bosses are. If you're familiar with the more played Final Fantasy VII, which was a lot of people's entry into the franchise, it will remind you of the scorpion robot in Final Fantasy VII. Only instead of not attacking when its tail is up, you're supposed to not attack when it's hiding in its shell. Because the shell absorbs magic, and it will replenish the creature's health. Easy enough to avoid if you don't get too crazy with punching in attack commands, and wait to see what the animation does. Terra is one of my favorite overall characters in any Final Fantasy game. It probably wouldn't surprise you considering she's the first character you play as in the game, and you get attached to her quite easily. I've seen it said that the world of balance is basically Terra's half of the game, and the world of ruin is Seal's, who I also rather liked once I got to her part in the game. It's a very large cast, and the only really annoying thing is after the world of ruin, you have to find everybody all over again before you go to Kefka Tower, and then it's just a grind to the top. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd like to take this time to say, if you're enjoying this video, then smash that like button. Show me some love. Also, shout out to TJ's Reviews for encouraging me to create my own YouTube channel. I'm pretty new to YouTube and never made a video before, but I read up some things on Let's Plays, time lengths, and YouTube and decided, what the hell? I'll give it a go. The Empire is kind of another Star Wars reference, and something Final Fantasy has been doing since Final Fantasy II. I mean the real 2, not 4 renumbered as 2. I think 4 also had an empire, and an emperor like 3 here has. Final Fantasy XII is especially guilty of copying Star Wars plot and elements from the movies. Just the airship clips alone look like something out of Star Wars. but I might talk about that more in depth should I ever get around to dusting off my PlayStation 2. In this game, Hera was given a slave crown, and her memory was wiped. Magic was long since lost, but the Empire is trying to revive its deadly force even as the rest of the world survives through steam technology. Terra has amnesia for pretty much the rest of the game, and I can't remember if she ever gets her memory back. It's been ages since I've played this game, so some parts are rusty to me while other parts are second nature. I can't tell you how many times I've played this game as both a kid and an adult. And yes, I've beaten it on multiple occasions, but this will be the first time I get it all on tape. I don't know how many parts this series will be. I plan to make a playlist out of it, so you can all venture through the parts more easily. If you're looking for something to comment on, I'll give you a couple of topics to consider. Number 1, I think it would be cool to see some fond childhood memories about Final Fantasy III and what you like and hate about the game. I also would like to see some fun mentions of other Super Nintendo games and Final Fantasy games you remember playing and would like to see me play. Also, why not talk about some of your favorite Final Fantasy characters, not just in this title, but across the entire franchise of Final Fantasy? We're at what? 16 mainline titles now? And that's not even talking about direct sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and spiritual successors. Of course, as much as I would like them to do more with Final Fantasy III's world, I think they did great with just one standalone title and wouldn't want them to ruin it with a sequel or a prequel, but I would love to see them give Final Fantasy III the Final Fantasy VII Remake treatment, as it would be awesome to see on my PlayStation 5. Though by the time they consider making such a title, we'd probably be on PlayStation 9. Okay, who remembers the chore of random battles back in the day? When I was a kid, I used to hate them. Wandering around in a dungeon or something, and constantly running into enemies to fight. Running low on health, magic points, and items. No save slot in sight. It killed me more times than I care to count. Now random battles don't bother me so much. They're part of the charm of classic Japanese RPG titles and something of a novelty these days. I feel a lot of what used to make role-playing games so great have been lost with the rise of Western RPGs like Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Elder Scrolls, and Fallout. Don't get me wrong, I love those games. But even the newer Final Fantasy games have lost the magic of what used to make them so great. I long for the days of active time battle, random encounters, and switching between partners. That said, I'm not a hater. I've enjoyed more Final Fantasy games than I really disliked. I even liked Final Fantasy XIII. Sue me. And for those wondering, and my friend TJ has asked me this a bunch, I took really good care of my Super Nintendo as a kid, so it has not turned yellow. The Super Nintendo is my baby, and is responsible for me becoming a gamer. Just so you guys can ease up a bit, I don't plan to talk about sexism in games, poor women representations, or anything of that nature. I feel there's a time and a place for that. This channel is mainly to reminiscence about old games from the Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1, and Xbox 360 eras. I'm not here to make a political statement. Just have fun playing the damn games. In case there is anyone wondering why this game is called Final Fantasy III, while it's actually called Final Fantasy VI. Allow me to explain. When Final Fantasy first came over to the States after being released in Japan, we missed a few of its titles. Instead of getting Final Fantasy II or III, we got Final Fantasy IV on Super Nintendo after the original game was ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System. So to have it make sense, they decided to renumber 4 too. We also didn't get Final Fantasy V either, so when 6 came out it became 3 over here. But when Final Fantasy VII came out for PlayStation, I guess Squaresoft of America decided to cut the bullshit and just name it 7. Which confused many of us growing up. When I saw that the new one was 7, I was left wondering what happened to 4, 5, and 6. It wasn't until years later I realized what was going on. And I think outside of emulation and the real 3's remake, we never got the original Final Fantasy III game over here. I heard it's hard as hell. Hell, Square actually thought that Final Fantasy V was too hard for us Americans, so that's why they withheld that game from us too. Now we're on Final Fantasy XVI. Which I still haven't gotten around to playing. I still need to get my hands on the second part of Final Fantasy VII too. I haven't read much about it, but I'm left wondering if our stats from the first part is going to cross over or do we start back at the beginning? If you know the answer, please feel free to comment below. I'm curious to know. Summons in this game are also really interesting. They're called espers and they have a critical role to play in the plot. I can't tell you yet in case you don't know, but you'll see them carry along much later. I actually forget when you get your first summon. I'm excited just to get up to Locke here as he was always one of my favorite characters in this game, and I used to have a little crush on him when I was a little girl. Just his facial expressions on that old sprite, and his insistence to call stealing treasure hunting, it's just so darn cute. Okay, I need to be wrapping this up now. We're getting to Locke's part soon and the Mughals. But we'll see this at a later date. I don't know how frequently I'll be able to upload as I'm busy with work, raising a kid, and the duties to my partner. But I promise I'll try to upload as frequently as possible. After all, I have games to beat, and that takes time. Time I may have to invest during the weekends, as that's the only time I'm not working and the wife is taking care of the kid. We also have a dog, so there's that too. I hear a lot of people look at YouTube as a way to make money and as a job. Me? I'm not interested in all of that. I don't really care how many views or subs I get. I just enjoy sharing games from my past and my thoughts on them. So if that's what you're into, then stick around. There's more coming.